What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in. My name's Royce.
And my name is also Royce. Now, since today's video is all about the camera in these phones,
I went ahead and shot the intro using their cameras.
Over here was shot on the iPhone 6s Plus's front-facing camera.
And this was shot on the Galaxy S7 Edge's front-facing camera.
Now, before I actually get into comparing the two, let's talk about some specs.
My bad. I came in
How
late.
did you still mess up? How do you
I know,
still mess up the
I
time?
know.
We practiced
One more
100
time.
times.
Come on, man. Just one more time.
Come on, one more time, man. I'm asking one more time. Here are the specs. So both phones are rocking a 12 megapixel rear camera, which on the S7 Edge is a slight downgrade from 16 megapixels on the S6. The iPhone has an f2.2 aperture with 1.2 micron pixels and true tone flash, where the S7 Edge has a faster f1.7 aperture with larger 1.4 micron pixels and LED flash. The 6s Plus utilizes what Apple calls focus pixels for autofocus, while the S7 Edge utilizes dual pixels, which allows for, as Samsung claims, real-time autofocus. For video, both phones have optical image stabilization, shoot 4K at 30 frames per second. The 6s Plus can shoot 1080p up to 120 frames per second, where the S7 Edge can only do up to 60 frames per second. But both can do super slow-mo in 720p at 240 frames per second. Both phones have a 5 megapixel front camera. The S7 Edge has the faster 1.7 aperture again versus the 6s Plus's f2.2 aperture. The S7 Edge also has dual video calls, but both phones have front flashes and auto HDR. And for video, the S7 Edge's front camera can shoot Quad HD footage or 2K footage, where the 6s Plus's front camera is still stuck at 720p. Now getting into some examples, first thing I noticed was how each phone handles color. The 6s Plus seemed to hold more natural tones, where the S7 Edge tended to boost the saturation. And with this photo, by zooming in, you can actually see a difference in detail, where the iPhone was able to capture more in this photo versus the S7 Edge, where the details washed out by the oversaturation. In different lighting, the S7 Edge was able to produce a brighter picture, but the 6s Plus was able to keep the natural purple tone of the flowers. And if we zoom in here, the iPhone still holds a bit more detail. It's a small difference, but one worth noting. One of the areas where the S7 Edge does shine is its dynamic range. It's significantly better than the 6s Plus, and I purposely shot towards the sun to see how they would handle it, and the S7 Edge was still able to take a more exposed shot than the 6s Plus. I also want to note that the S7 Edge does have a wider lens than the 6s Plus, so keep that in mind as we look at the rest of these photos. Here's another example on the 6s Plus with my lovely fiancée, Bianca Renee, in the foreground, but if you look at the guitar in the background, it's a little washed out from the sun. Now here's the same photo taken with the S7 Edge. It gives a more balanced exposure between the foreground and background without anything being washed out or too dark. And you know, not to beat a dead horse, but here's one more example with the 6s Plus favoring the sky, leaving the crowd and buildings a bit dark, while the S7 Edge does a better job exposing everything, though the sky does get a little washed out in the back. Here's Bianca again, up against a very colorful and cool looking wall. Has a very natural look to it. Now switching over to the S7 Edge, however, it tries to expose the photo more than it needs to in this instance, and boost the colors and skin tone. But zooming in closer, the S7 Edge does hold a bit more detail than the 6s Plus. The colors are just a little overly saturated in my opinion. Now here's the same setup taken with both phones in low light. This is where I was a little bit disappointed with the low light capability of the S7 Edge. Though the photo is brighter than the 6s Plus, it introduces a lot of yellow into the photo, where the iPhone still manages to keep everything neutral. Now, I wouldn't consider either of these photos actually usable, but I was hoping to see more of a beneficial difference between the two. And now here's the same shot taken with the 6s Plus's True Tone flash and the S7 Edge's LED flash. Here, the oversaturation complements the wall on the S7 Edge, but not so much the skin tones. But it does do a better job handling noise reduction than the 6s Plus. And now here it is, the only thing people probably really care about these days, how your food looks when you take a picture. And in this lower lit situation, the S7 Edge does come out ahead of the 6s Plus, providing a brighter and more detailed shot. Autofocus is another strong point for the S7 Edge, thanks to the phone's dual pixels. As you can see, my Disney Infinity figurines quickly snapping in and out of focus. And here on the 6s Plus, it just takes the figurines a little bit longer to get into focus, as the change is more gradual. Now with the front camera in daylight, you see the S7 Edge again does better with exposure, but even seems to smooth out the skin, which I'm not really sure I'm a fan of, but overall better picture than the 6s Plus. Here's another selfie, but in low light. The S7 Edge is brighter, but causes the highlights to be a little extreme in certain areas, as opposed to the 6s Plus. And again, the S7 Edge adds some smoothness to the photo to reduce noise, which again, I don't know if I like. Now, one last selfie shot in a dark room to test the front flash on each camera. And now this one, I can honestly say I prefer the tone and detail of the 6S Plus, where the S7 Edge is becoming borderline cartoonish now. Moving on to video, I actually found the 6S Plus handles exposure slightly better than the S7 Edge, which is interesting. It's more noticeable here how the iPhone does a better job at exposing the shot, though the S7 Edge does capture more due to the wider lens. And since this was shot in 4K, if we punch in, neither one really stands out more so than the other in my opinion, as they both handle detail well. With optical image stabilization, the 6S Plus proved to be way superior here, as the shots are just a lot smoother. And yes, both were taken at the exact same time and were held the exact same way. For slow-mo, there is also a significant difference, where the iPhone is nice and smooth, while the S7 Edge, if you pay attention, seems to skip every so often. Not sure why that is. And if you're looking to do some slow-mo at 1080p, it's going to be tougher on the S7 Edge, since it only goes up to 60 frames per second, while the 6S Plus doubles it at 120 frames per second. And again, back to the front-facing cameras, the S7 Edge had the advantage of shooting 2K resolution with a wider lens, while the 6S Plus can only record at 720p, but the 6S Plus still does a better job at recording more natural colors and avoids the glossy look of the S7 Edge.
And that's it for my camera comparison. I know there's still some features and things I didn't cover, but I didn't want this video to be 15 minutes long, so I focused on what you guys can actually expect to see right out of the box.
And if you're still wondering which one is better, it's honestly going to come down to personal preference, because even with the S7 Edge being superior in certain areas, there's still some trade-offs that usually come with it, where with the 6S Plus, you pretty much know the type of photo you're getting each time.
But regardless, both phones have great cameras with their own strengths and weaknesses, and hopefully I was able to shed some light on that for you guys.
If so, please like this video and subscribe if you want to see some more reviews by me, like the one that just popped up in the corner. Go ahead, click on it. It's cool.
And again, our names are Royce.
And thank you so much for watching.
Yes!